Welcome, truth seekers and trailblazers, to the Bigfoot, Wildman, and Boogers show, the podcast where shadows move, legends breathe, and Bigfoot might be closer than you think. Every week, we trek deep into the unknown, diving into eyewitness accounts and breaking down the evidence, exploring the mysteries behind North America's most mysterious cryptid. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us grow the tribe and bring even more wild encounters out of the woods and into your ears. Now grab your gear and steady your nerves, and let's take that first step into the woods with author and researcher Robby Raines. Hey there, Robby. How are you tonight?
I'm good, Marianne. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a little cold for me, but it is January.
That's true. We're already in January.
Right? Well, we're almost halfway through it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep. Time flies. Time flies. So, Robby, tonight, let's talk about, how did you get into Bigfoot? What was it that made you delve into this?
Well, yeah, you know the story, but maybe people who you have listening and watching don't. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I had an encounter at my great-grandparents' house. Without getting into that long, drawn-out story, basically what happened is I was in their house, my mother and her parents and my great-grandparents, who was my her maternal grandparents. They were all sitting out on the porch. I was in the house watching TV, about 9, somewhere around there, during a summer night. So there was no school. Got up to turn the TV off to go back out and watch them. I looked to my right through the kitchen and into the back porch, and I see a face looking in at me. Took me a minute to process what I was looking at. Then once it hit me, in my childish brain, the word monster comes out.
Right.
And I didn't scream, but that's what I thought. So, long story short, that kind of course, most of them didn't believe me. It was all you're imagining things, this, that, and the other. So for about 40 years, I pretty much just kind of kept it to myself, never really talked about it.
Right.
But I was always interested in watching, the In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, and back then you're same way. We didn't have the internet where if you had a curiosity like that, you
Right.
had to read or watch something like that on regular TV. Watching the $6 Million Man with his, his 2 shows where Bigfoot was on. It just,
Right.
That's about the gist of watching Legend of Boggy Creek. That was one of the ones that really got to me and got me into it, because that opening scene where he's out and that little kid's running across the field and jumps across the barbed wire fence, that looked and reminded me of almost identical to the back pasture of my great-grandfather's farm. So that kind of hit home with me when I watched it, because I watched it after I had the encounter.
Oh, okay.
I can remember my great-grandmother used to tell me, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together, because like I said, back then, you didn't have the internet. She used to say, don't go too far in the woods or the boogers will get you.
Okay. I was going to ask you if she called them that.
Yeah, but I didn't know that was
that's what she meant, right?
Yeah, I didn't know that was a local term for, because like I said, watching In Search Of things like that, all you hear is Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yeti, abominable snowman. You don't hear booger back then in that. That's right. Even though that term has been around for a long time, it's really only recently become a popular term, I guess is the best way to say it. So
right.
She would say, don't go too far. But I just thought she meant, like monsters or things like that. 8 or 9 years old, you're not, especially back then, in the early 80s, you didn't know what that meant unless they just out and out told you. And she never told me what that meant. I guess she just let my imagination go with that. But so that was how I got into it and stayed into it. And then, but like I said, I kept it to myself. I didn't, I would, if I saw a book in the library, my grandparents would take us, me and my brother and my cousins, to the library on I think we'd go every Thursday in the summer to have books over the weekend. And any book that I could find on Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, any of that kind of stuff. That was what I got. My brother and cousins were getting, all kinds of other books. That was,
You had all the monster books, didn't you?
yeah, I had all the monster books.
Yeah.
So that just all, and I always loved horror movies too. So I kind of, that was kind of my mother hated the fact that I liked stuff like that. Friday the 13th was always one of my favorites. And, so I always had that morbid curiosity about those type things.
Do you remember that series? And DA the other day, I saw him with something on it. Kolchak. Yes.
Yes. Kolchak and Night Stalker. I love that. Love that show too.
Yes. Loved it.
That, I used to watch, I had it in my head and it just blanked out. The old vampire soap opera type thing, Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
I used to watch Dark Shadows, all that kind of creepy stuff. I love that stuff. So, but there again, like I said, anytime I ever talk, especially, or even when I was an adult, anytime I would talk about that and somebody would ask me, I'm not the kind of guy who's going to say, oh, no, I don't believe it. If somebody asked me if you believe in that, I'm going to tell them, yeah. Well, why? And then obviously I'd tell my story, and of course they'd laugh or make fun or whatever. So, but I always had the passion to find stuff about it, read stuff. So one day, messing around on Audible, I come across Codename Wild Hunt, Odin's Call. I'm like, okay. So I listened to a sample of it. I'm like, oh, this was Cam Buckner's narrating that one. I said, yeah, this is interesting. So I went ahead and got the book, listened to it, had no clue who D.A. Roberts was at this time.
Right.
But get to the towards the end of the book, or not the end of it, but sort of the beginning of the third act, he wrote a line in there where they were, and it was in Oklahoma around Broken Bow Lake is where he set this one at. And there's a scene where Clark's leading his platoon out to look for the downed Air Force or the Air Force PJs, parajumpers. And there was a line where one of the guys called a stop to the patrol, and Clark goes up and says, "What is?" He said, "I got one about 25 yards ahead of us." He said he's tree peeking, and the way DA described it was sitting there, rocking back and forth and kind of peeking out behind a tree, which you've heard all that behavior and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But this was before I got into all this, so I didn't know anything about all the podcasts that were out there at the time. I didn't know anything. I was relatively unknown to that community, or this community at that time. And I read that line, and as soon as I read that line, it brought I hadn't really thought or talked about it at that point, probably 15 or 20 years. So when I read that line, it just brought all that back, because that's what it was doing when I looked out outside that, or looked through that door that night. It was swaying back and forth like that. So when I read that line, it just brought all that stuff back to me. And I just had a relapse of all those memories. And I was like, ooh, that was something. So
that was your
at the end of
Jesus moment, right?
Yeah, it was. It really was. Cause I was like, hey, he just wrote down, described what I saw. So there was at the end of the book, there's his email. And I'm like, well, I had no clue about independent authors versus, big. I'm like, I'll send this email, but there's no way he's going to respond to little old me. So I sent him an email, and sure enough, about maybe the next day, it might've been quicker than that, but at least by the next day, he responded to me. And so one email turned into two turned into 10 turned into 20. And, and I told him my story. He said, man, I want to get you on for a phone interview, which I know what he was doing at that time, because, both of us being police officers. He was want me to tell my story face to face so he could see if I was embellishing, making things up and all that.
Right.
So he was taking notes, wrote the story down. He said, well, I'm going to have this on next Wednesday. Well, I was still coaching soccer at the time, and I thought, well, dang it, I'm not going to get to watch it. And something happened. I think it was a bad storm or something, so I had to cancel practice. So I was going to be able to be home. So I sent DA a text. I said, hey, I'm going to be home, so I'll get to listen to you tell my story. He goes, well, why don't you just come on and tell it yourself? And I'm like, Uh,
What?
what? So,
Yep.
long story short, I went on, and I thought I was just going to be on for 10, 15 minutes, tell my story, and off. No, I was on for like 2.5, 3 hours with him that night. Just went through my segment, and then he said, "Well, stay on with us and finish the show out if you want to." And I'm like, "Okay." So we finished the show out, and I had said something to him before about having an idea about doing my own show. And like I said, I just want to do a podcast, just put it on for audio. I didn't want to do the video stuff.
Right.
And I said, because I'd already talked to my buddy Lance, the one that helped me out with the first couple of shows that I did. And he said, "Well, yeah, I'll be glad to help you any way I can." Because DA, that's how he is. He never views people as competition. He helps as many people as he can. So Lance and I recorded the first show, then I sent it to him, and he listened to it. He said, "Man," he said, "this is good." He said, "You definitely need to go ahead and do this." He said, "But you want to come on the show before you release it, and we'll promote it?" I'm like, "Okay." And I was a little bit less nervous about it at that point. Not still nervous, but not as nervous.
Right. Those first few are a little nerve-wracking, aren't they?
Yeah. So I went on and we promoted the show, and I there again stayed on from the start of the show to the end of the show this time. Then he asked me back for another show for something. I can't remember, it was something, but it was something that I had a good knowledge base in. And after that show, he was like, "Dude," he said, "why don't you just be one of my co-hosts?" He said, "If you can be," I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "I'm working day shift, so I can be here every Wednesday, and I'm off on weekends because I was, the SRO, so I work Monday through Friday." And he was like, "Well, yeah, can you do that?" I'm like, "Yeah." And so that's how all there's probably a little bit more to it than that, but that's how my encounter got DA and I together, and the Nightmare Hunters where we're at from now. That's how everything got started with us.
Well, and tell everybody where you guys are at.
We're still on YouTube. It's under the Nightmare Hunters podcast, but we're also on the UNX network, so you can hear us on iHeart, Spreaker, all the places that you get podcasts. We're on UNX Radio every Wednesday and Saturday night, and we had to drop it back an hour, so it's instead of it being 8:00 your time, it's now 7:00. That Central, I think, is your time.
Yes.
7:00 Central. So we dropped it back an hour. Now we still do a Monday night show with DA and I, which is called Monday Mayhem, and that's not on UNX. That's just on our normal channel and everything. That's where DA and I are writing a book and letting the chat help us, with naming things, giving us chapter titles, just kind of pulling back the curtain and showing them the process of how we go about writing books. And that's been pretty good. We're about 20,000 words into that book, and it also ties into mine and DA's books, because all of our books tie into each other now.
Okay.
So if you like a character from one of DA's books, it may show up in my books, and vice versa. If there's a character from my books, you might see them in some of his books. So it was a chore and a task to get everything going. But once we finally figured it out, it's actually been pretty fun and pretty challenging.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, now, and what's the name? Okay, so tell us about your series of books that you've got going on right now.
Okay, my series, the first series, is the Shadow Walker series, and that's got Silver Star, Creature of Skateboard Swamp, and Terror of the Wampus Cat. That's the first 3 books in that series. Then I did a kind of a prequel book. It's called Howl the Night Wolf, and it takes place back in 18th century Scotland.
Okay.
And it kind of tells, because if you've read any of DA's books, there's a central character in one of his books named Gideon, who was he was the centurion that stabbed Jesus in the side with a spear while he was hanging on the cross. So, and while there's nothing biblical that says he actually did this, but as DA put it, Jesus looked down when he did it and said, soldier, content with what you are, then what you are is what you'll be. So basically what Jesus tells Gideon is, you're going to walk the earth and you're going to fight evil until I come back. So Gideon is basically been cursed with immortality. So everybody that's in Gideon's line, if they take up the fight against evil, they begin living longer. So Clark, Declan, all those characters that DA has written are in that bloodline. Also, Rick, my first character, Ramsey, who's the main character in the Howl the Night Wolf, are all in Gideon's bloodline. So then from Howl the Night Wolf, I go into the Grail series, which stands for Guards Regiment Anomalous Investigation and Liquidation. It's basically like the English or UK version of the Wild Hunt. They take care of the stuff overseas that the Wild Hunt takes care of here. Well, Ramsey being part of that bloodline, he gets Rick from the first book. Or the first 3 books. He comes over and becomes part of that team. So Rick is now the main protagonist in that series. And I just finished the book 8 that I just finished is called Wild Hunt Shadow Hunters. And that's basically Rick's son, Kurt, has taken up as the main protagonist in that book. And then Rick's daughter will be taken over as the main protagonist in the Shadow Walkers series. So I've got 3 series and one kind of middle it's kind of attached to all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got Kodiak, which on the surface, Kodiak isn't attached to any of them. It's just kind of like a man versus nature type thing.
Yeah.
But DA and I have talked, and I think the main character from that is probably going to show up in some of DA's books because he liked the kid and he liked how I wrote him. And I kind of left it that way on purpose. He ended up becoming his dad was a ranger, and that's how he learned to survive. And he used all those skills when he was their kayaks capsized on the Kodiak archipelago, and he had to use everything to be able to survive. So flash forward at the end of the book, he graduates from ranger school. So DA liked that. He's probably going to use that character in an upcoming book. So that one's tied in. And I'm also writing book 9. I'm about halfway through that, which that'll be another one on the surface that's not attached, but probably will be attached because there's some things that we discussed that we're probably going to put that in. So like I said, they're all attached. It's somehow or another connected.
Somehow or another. Yeah. Well, you've been busy then, haven't you?
Yeah. I think I had 2 books, maybe 3. I think I know I had the 2 out when I came down to your conference.
Yeah, you had 2. You had 2. Yeah.
So from that point to now, I've got 7 in print, and the 8th one I'm just waiting on Luca to get everything back to me. So probably next week, book 8 will go out, and then I just got to finish book 9, and it'll go out probably sometime in February. So yeah, a little busy, but it's something you enjoy, right? Oh yeah, I've probably had more fun with this than any other little. It's gone past just a hobby. Like the laser engraving stuff and all that stuff. That's fun, but that's never been more than just like, oh, I enjoy coming up with these things. Writing the books has actually gone past just an enjoyable hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And we've actually got Doc involved now too. He's just finished his first book. So
it's going to be a joint effort, right? Eventually, all of you.
Yeah. Well, and it's his first one is tied into the greater universe too, and he was like, "Well, I don't know, man. That's just I think that might just be one and done." And it was after we got off the show the other night, and me and D.A. were like, "Oh, no," and we started naming stuff. Oh, you could do this, and Doc's just sitting there looking down and writing and looking at. And he told us after the show last night, he said, "Boys," he said, I got after I got off with y'all, I got on the phone when Angie and was talking to her. He said, I think I got the material for like 6 books now. Just on what y'all were saying." We're like, see?
That's great. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, good. We'll put, we'll put your stuff in the description so that people can find your books, that they can go look in the description of the show. That'll all be linked there for you. So let's switch let's switch up now. Tell me about the first time you ever went out looking for Bigfoot.
Oh, let's see. When was the first time that I? Because I think I always, every time I was in the woods after that initial encounter, I think I was probably always looking over my shoulder.
Yeah.
So as far as pinning down the first time that I actually went, and that was the intention that I went, my dad, my son, my uncle, and I went up to Jones Gap in Oconee County, which is probably about 30 miles from where I'm sitting right now.
Okay.
And my uncle was always, this is my stepdad's youngest brother. So, and there's only like 6 to 7 years age difference between him and I. And he always believed me. He was one of the first ones that I told the story to, other than the ones that, that were out there. And he was, for the longest time, was the only family member that I ever had that ever actually believed me, because he had that same, he's probably where I got my love for horror movies from, because, every time I went to my grandmother's house, that's, me and him would go back in his room. That's what we would do, is watch scary movies.
Right.
And so he always believed me. Well, we decided, he'd been camping up there in some of those primitive campsites. And he said that, and at this point, my stepdad had gotten to where he believed me, because this was just like maybe, I see, my son's 26 now. This was probably when he was maybe 9 or 10. So, let's just say it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there. And so we went up there to walk the Jones Gap Trail, and there was nobody else up there. When we got in the parking lot, there was no other cars there besides ours. So for any of the stuff that we witnessed or heard to be other people, it would have been pretty rare, because like I said, there was no bicycles, there was no cars, there was nothing. This was like a Tuesday at 11 o'clock. So there was, it was not a whole lot of people in Jones Gap State Park on a Tuesday.
Right.
In the wintertime. It just happened to be, us goofballs aside, that's when we was going to go up there. So we get up there and we get pretty good ways up the trail. And we got to talking about samurai chatter, because that was kind of when that was first really becoming a thing that they talked about.
Okay.
Or at least at first that I'd really heard about it. They probably had talked about it before that, but that was the first, when I first started hearing about it. And my dad kept saying that he thought he was hearing something like carrying on a conversation down in front of us, but it was kind of moving with us, but away, or out in front of us. And so he said, we come up to the base of this big cliff, and it was probably, the rock wall is probably 40, 50 feet straight up. Mm-hmm. So my Uncle Scott and I decided, well, okay, we're gonna hunker down right next to this little cliff, and y'all keep on walking and doing what you're doing, and we're gonna just stay here and be quiet and see if whatever it is, maybe it'll circle back around, or we'll see something or hear something if we just sit here and we're quiet. So Dad and Kevin took off walking down the trail, and Scott and I stayed up against the rock wall. Didn't say a word, just kind of sitting there listening, looking around. About a minute after they left, everything got real quiet. No insects, no squirrels, no nothing. Just everything just got quiet. And it's probably, I'll say it's probably like 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, somewhere around there. And like I said, we were up against a cliff, and all of a sudden, a rock or chestnut or something hit the ground right in front of us, maybe about that far in front of us. Well, there was, we kind of look up, and you can't see up at the top of the cliff because the way the trees are. But the trees that were in front of us, none of them had any kind of, there was no chestnut or pecan or any kind of, there's like mostly like pines and stuff like that in front of us. Stuff that wouldn't have anything that would drop like that on it. So he was like, well, maybe there's a tree up there and it dropped.
Yeah.
Well, about that time, another one hit, and then another one, and another. I mean, just like in quick succession. I'm like, I don't think 4 or 5 of them things just fell off the tree at once. Just
At the same time,
just
right?
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't like it was over here. It was like literally like right, like something saying, "I know you're down there."
Yeah.
You know, that's what it was like, because they were hitting almost in the exact same spot right in front of us, and we never heard anything, we never saw anything, but those were just hitting the ground like right in front of us. And so that goes on for a couple minutes, and then Dad and Kevin kind of circle back around. They come back up, and as soon as they started coming back up the trail, it stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing that other than what Dad said he heard, and that was the only thing that we had or heard or experienced that day. But I don't think there were people up there throwing stuff down at us.
Right. Well, and and it's funny you say that. We experienced in September, we went to Arkansas and experienced kind of the same thing. Other than there was a cabin with a metal roof, but it was just like constantly something hitting that roof. And, we finally, takes a while for it to sink in that that's okay. The ground should be covered in acorns at that point then, right? And we go over there and there's really not any acorns on the ground. There's not any hickory nuts. And we found an acorn. We threw it up there. It didn't make the same noise. The hickory nut didn't make the same noise. When we threw a small rock up there, we got the same noise. Well, you know as well as I do, rocks don't grow on trees.
Last I checked, they didn't.
Right? So, there was something, and this went on the whole time we were in the campground. I mean, there would be times that it was a lot more, and it would go on at night and things like that. It was going on when the wind wasn't blowing, so at some point you have to go, that's not natural.
Yeah. Well, and that's same thing. There was no wind. There was no squirrels scurrying around. So, because I told that story before, somebody said, "I was probably just squirrel." I said, there was no squirrels moving. I said, there was nothing. There was no other animals in the forest. Deer don't climb trees to get nuts off the trees. Last time I checked.
Yeah.
There was no squirrels. There was no other people that we saw in there, unless there were some people that saw us and said, "You know what? I bet they're in there hunting for Bigfoot. So let's go mess with them." And they ran ahead of us, climbed up that 50-foot rock wall, and knew that my uncle and I were going to stay right there, and knew exactly where we were at, because we couldn't even see the top of the cliff from the overhang of the trees. So it's just it gets to a point where you're like, okay, there's just too many variables to where you have to say, okay, I guess this is what it was.
Yes, exactly. So yeah. I mean, and they probably were messing with you, because the longer you're in this and the longer you go out, it seems to be that they have a pretty good, I don't know if it's sense of humor or they just think they like to aggravate people. I don't know what it is, but they're out there doing that stuff. That's for sure. So
I think it was just more or less like they knew we were there, and they were just like, maybe they were just messing with us, but I think it was just hey, we know you're down there, just tossing whatever they had up there. And like I said, it could have been rocks, could have been nuts, it could have been acorns. I don't know what it was, but
well, and it's like, so and they all kind of landed in the same area, correct, in front of you?
Yep. Probably within a 5-foot radius.
Yeah. And you get people like, oh, that's aggressive behavior. No, they weren't pelting you in the head, were they?
No, it was within, like I said, it was within a 5-foot radius of where they were dropping, but it was probably a good 6.5, 7 feet in front of where we were sitting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they'd wanted to, they probably could have dropped them straight down on us from where we were at, but they were just kind of, and what I'm envisioning is they were just kind of pitching them like that, so they would go out in front of us.
Yeah,
because you'd hear whatever they were throwing. You'd hear them hitting limbs coming down, when they hit the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's you hear more of that behavior as time goes on. That's just a common thing, for them to throw rocks, and not huge rocks either. I mean, and I'm assuming rocks, like you said, it could have been hickory nuts, acorns,
Yeah,
anything,
it was small enough to where when you would hear it hit, you'd try to look up, and by the time you'd look up, it would hit the ground, and it was small enough that you couldn't. It wasn't like there was a rock that big sitting on the ground. You're like, oh well, that was it. It was small enough to where when it hit the ground, it mixed in with the leaf litter, and you couldn't tell what it was. It was actually
Yeah.
had been thrown.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so what was the next thing that happened to you?
Probably didn't do anything after that for a good while until probably when Johnny and I went up to that, which was same area of woods, probably not the exact same spot, but it's probably like the trailhead that could take you up to that spot. But we met up there. He had an encounter, and this is the first time that I met Johnny, who was the guy that ended up being my co-host until our show ended. And probably right after we started the show, he sent me an email. So however long that's been, I guess 4 years ago, maybe, when I started that show.
Mm-hmm.
He sent me an email. So I sent him one back. He said he had an encounter up in Greenville County off Highway 11. So we set it up, and I met with him. We went up there. Me and him went in. We walked the trail. We were going back to where he had the encounter, and something just told me to stop and look around at this one little crossing area, because it was kind of looked like a hard packed trail. So I was like, I don't think I'm gonna find any kind of tracks or anything. But for some reason, something just told me to stop and start looking around that area, because it was right before we come to a big clearing. So I'm looking around, and I saw a rock that had been socketed. Remember what I told you about? It's a rock that's been in the ground, but something stepped on it and popped it out of the ground. Right. So I looked at that, and I was like, I told Johnny, I said, well, that hadn't been done long. And I saw where it lined up, and I walked over, and it was kind of just one of them where the trail went right up to the edge of a bank, and then they went straight up. So I started looking almost dead in line with where that rock was socketed, and I find a partial track that had like 4 of the toes dug into the bank going up the mountain. It's like it would have been like from the front part of the foot forward with like 4 of the toes. It's like the big toe what was missing, because I guess it was hanging down off the bank or whatever when it started. Yeah. So I saw that, and I looked up, and I could see scuff marks going up the rest of the hill. And I told Johnny, I said, well, let's go over here and see if we can find where it came up, because the creek was run right beside that, but it was down lower. So the trail was kind of like in the middle. It's like you got a bank here and a bank there. One goes up, one goes down. So whenever I found a couple other scuff marks coming up the hill, and they were directly in line with that. And I said, well, this is where it crossed over the path. But the funny thing is if it had crossed further forward or further back, it would have been soft enough ground to where it would have left tracks going across the path. This is just an area where there was just nothing but hard packed dirt and rocks that were sunk into the ground. But I just, like I said, something just told me to stop and look there, and I saw that rock that was socketed, and it looked interesting, and I started looking in line with it and find that partial track there, scuff marks, and then find the scuff marks coming up the hill. So that was pretty.
And so now, had your buddy seen this animal?
No, what had happened with him is he had him and his girlfriend at the time had decided they just wanted to go up there and walk around, and they walked back to this. They walked down to a little bridge area, and then they got off the trail and was walking up this. It's a little swimming hole that people go up there to swim in, and they went up there, and they were just out in the little hole swimming, and just a little deep area of the creek. And Johnny said it kind of got quiet, and he heard something, but he don't know what he heard. And he looked up, and he could, like, looking through the trees, he saw like this lone tree. It was kind of like there was trees around it, but you could tell there was a clearing around this tree. And he looked up all the other trees. There was no winds. These trees are still, but that lone tree in the middle, he said it was just doing like this, just swaying back and forth. No wind, but it was moving. And then as he's sitting there watching that, he heard what he said sounded like a grunt, but he can't swear exactly what it was, but he saw that tree shaking. So he turns around to his girl and says, get your stuff and let's get out of here. And he said she didn't question it. She just, because he don't know for sure if she even saw the tree shaking or not. He did. He said,
Yeah.
but he took that as aggressive behavior, and he was like, yeah, it's probably time to back on out of here. So they backed out of there, and now he wasn't looking for tracks, so he had not seen the tracks or anything. But that's what he saw, and that was like, it was like a week in between that and the time we went back out there.
Okay. That's interesting. So could you get any kind of idea of how big the track was off that parcel? Or
it was, what we saw, the parcel was about that much. And like I said, it was from the front of the foot forward, and it was still about that big. So it's pretty big track.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do believe there was some juveniles in that area too, because another guy that used to hang out with us, he went up there, me and him and another guy, and we had walked, and every time we went up there and walked in and walked out, we got paced. Not necessarily in every time, but every time we came out, we were paced out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's this big red gate, like forestry uses to cross, here's the parking area. You can't drive a vehicle past this. They put those big red gates. You can walk around them, but you can't drive any further. So once we get to that gate and get out in the parking area, it would stop and just stay back in the woods. But obviously the woods went on around. There's only like one or two houses anywhere close to this area anyway. So this time though, we get back out of the vehicles and we're standing out there putting our gear up. So we're kind of sitting there talking, and all of a sudden we hear a tree snap or limb snap, kind of like the gate is over here on this side of us. We're at my truck and it snaps over here way past where the gate's at. Mm-hmm. And as we look up, we hear something big kind of falling down, like falling, rolling, sliding, whatever it was, down that embankment. Well, you couldn't see through the trees, whatever it was. As we start moving towards it, we hear a limb break. I mean, I'm talking like one that sounded like a 12 gauge shotgun going off.
Yeah.
Back over that way. Well, when we turn and look back that way, as we turn and kind of move back that way, we hear whatever this was get up, run back up the hill, and then back over towards where the other one was. So I'm thinking that was a juvenile that was like, okay, this is training day. You're going to pace them out. It went further than it was supposed to, messed up, fell down the hill. We were going that way. Dad, mom, whoever, older brother, whoever it was, saw us headed that way, did something to distract us so we could get back where it needed to. That's just my theory of piecing it together and how it happened that day. That's what I think it was.
Yeah. That I think that happens more times than not. I think the juveniles are incredibly curious. I think all of them are, but I think the juveniles, are just like any little kid. They're curious. They want to see what's going on. How close can they get? All those things. And they always slip up somewhere, in their training.
Yep. And that's in my mind, that makes the most sense based on everything that was going on. I mean, it could have been something totally different than that, but in my mind, that just makes the most sense as to what it was.
Right. Well, and when you've been out in the woods enough, what other animals sound like. I know people will say that to us, oh, well, it was this or that. Well, when you've spent enough time out there, what a deer sounds like walking. What things sound like. You can tell the difference between 2 feet and 4 feet. And
but that's the thing. You usually don't hear deer moving in the woods, even because they're so good at being quiet. I don't know a hunter, myself included, who has ever shot a deer that they didn't see him move first.
Before they heard it.
And I'm talking like you're looking around. It's not there. Hey, where'd that thing come from? Because they're so. But you take a squirrel and it sounds like a herd of one squirrel sounds like a herd of elephants.
Oh my God! Right, or an armadillo.
You can have 100. Yeah, you can have 100-pound deer, and you not know it's there until it moves, and you can have one 5-pound squirrel that sounds like 15 elephants walking through the woods. And, those, like you just said, those armadillos that night that we had run out on us, that sounded like I would have swore that was a grizzly the way it sounded coming out of the woods at night.
Oh, I know. I know. I've had people before like, oh my God. Oh my God. I'm like, hang on a minute. Just hang on a minute. I'm telling you, I'm pretty sure that's going to be an armadillo. And when they pop out, they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I know. I know. It's like, what? Armadillo is what? Maybe 10 pounds, 15 at the most.
Probably. Yeah.
And it sounds like it's 200 or 300 pounds, you know? Yeah. It's crazy. Crazy stuff. And the only time you hear a deer is when they're spooked and they are running for their life.
Yeah.
That's the only time you're going to hear a deer out there. But it's like people don't spend enough time out there to really realize what things sound like. And when you know what they sound like, you can pick the things out that are not normal or what we deem as not normal. But so
yeah, and that's true. You hit the nail on the head with that. There's not enough people that get out there, and like DA tells a story. He had some buddies that wanted to go out in the woods, and they were up in elk country, and they woke him up at like 2:00 in the morning, thinking they had Bigfoot screaming up on the mountain ridge, and he's like, "That's an elk bugle. Have you never heard of an elk bugle? Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yes."
That's funny. That's good. We were out. See, we don't have elk in Missouri. They have in the last few years reintroduced them in one of the southeastern state or counties. God, I can't talk. But they're not like all over the place, right? And a couple of years ago, we were out doing the Ozark Mountain Bigfoot Conference, the private camp out. And we were sitting out there on the side of the hill one night, and it's midnight, 1 a.m, something like that, right? And there's 4 or 5 of us sitting out there. And we get this elk call. And we're like, what? We're all looking at each other going, where the hell did that come from, right? And it didn't sound quite right. It almost sounded like sickly. It's an elk call, but it's, it wasn't that pristine whistle. We were all like, okay, that's not right. I mean, who knows what it was, but it wasn't an elk. We know that much.
Yeah.
So tell me about the first time you ever went out with DA.
Oh, the first time we ever went out was Joe Bald, and it was me, him, and Noah, his son, his youngest son. And that was the night. If you've heard the story of the 24-hour service truck, that was the night we ran into the 24-hour service truck. Don't ask me what kind of service it was, because it just said 24-hour service. There are no houses in Joe Bald. It's a primitive campsite when it was operational, so there's nothing to service in Joe Bald, but it was there and it followed us around. But we found a track that night. We didn't have any casting material with us, and we were going to come back the next morning. We got up and we were at Walmart probably by 7:30 the following morning. Was back out there by 8:15, and there was a tire track through that footprint.
Oh wow!
Drove through the track. You see where the wheel turned, and they backed out.
That's wild.
So I guess I guess the service was 24-hour track removal. That's the only thing I can come up with is the only service that they were providing.
Yeah.
We saw eye shine that night. That next day is when we found that big what we call the hunting blind, but it basically like a big bird's nest turned on its side. We think we're kind of under the impression that was a dog man that we were dealing with that first night, because it tried to get us to come that way that night, and that was the night that Noah became the Robby Wrangler, because that was the night that DA found out that I just just me and you're the same.
Yeah.
We go and don't worry about what consequences. There we go. Yeah, that was the night that Noah became the Robby Wrangler, because when the eye shine disappeared out of the tree, DA said, I didn't hear it leave. I said, that's because it didn't leave. It's still here. and I was walking that way, and I would have walked right on that game trail and walked right past this hunting blind that we talked about, because Noah and I found it the next morning.
Yeah.
So I get inside this thing, and I'm not huge, but I'm not small by any means. And I was down on my hands and knees, and I got up my knees, and I stretched my arms out, and I had about 1.5 to 2 feet on either side of my reach before I would have touched the side. And this is like where you just taking these little saplings and things like that, and they're woven together. It's not like they just grew this way. You can tell that they were like put where they were supposed to be, so it would stay that way. And then I reached up, and I could barely touch the top of the limbs that were hanging over. So I told DA, I said, go back up the trail a little ways, turn around, and start walking this way, and tell me when you can see me. I had on just regular old woodland camouflage pants, a black pulley or pullover hoodie, and my camouflage Dark Angel medical hat. Not like I was like really, really camouflaged out. And it wasn't like I was way back in. I was like that far, probably that far away from the trail.
Right.
And him and Noah walked back up the trail, probably like 15, 20 yards, something like that. DA turned around and knew where I was at, knew where to look, knew what I was wearing, turned around and couldn't see me. He said, dude, he said, I know where you're at, but I can't see you at all. I said, well, just walk this way and tell me when you can see me. He was within 5.5 to 8 feet before he could actually see me, and knew exactly where to look. Yeah. So had I walked down that trail the night before, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Wow. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So were the saplings that were all woven together, were they still in the ground? Had they been pulled up and put in, or
no,
how?
They were in the ground, and it's like, now there might have been some that were in the middle of the opening, so to speak, that might have been removed, but the ones that formed the opening and the canopy around it, they were all still in the ground. They'd just been bent and kind of forced together.
Okay. See, that's interesting, because it's like they've just taken right there everything that's right there in that spot and put it all together, So
and it's just like the best comparison we got is just like, if you imagine a bird's nest, you take that bird's nest and set it on its side. That's exactly what it looked like.
Okay. Well, that's wild. Now, I know that you guys have been back down there a time or two. Have you been back past that spot and checked that spot to see if that's still there?
DA and Noah went down there not long, maybe a month or so after that, and it was still there. But the last time they went down there, that, depending on what time of year it is, the lake is up or down. I mean, you know that area. Yeah. So where it's at certain times can be actually under the water.
Oh, okay.
So they found it one other time after that, but then since then they haven't been able to find it because of the fluctuation of where the lakes, where it's at.
That's interesting, because you have such a wide variety of what people call structures, and sometimes it's nothing more than an X, but something like that's had to have been woven really makes you stop and think about that.
Yeah, and we actually found a canine print about that big around in the center of matter of fact, I was down on my hand or on my knuckles like this. I was looking up at Noah and DA and talking to them, and I looked down and I something just kind of caught my eye, and I started brushing leaves, with my hands, and DA's like, no, tell me you didn't. And I looked back up and I pointed out, I said, what does that look like to you? And Noah was like, a big dog print. So I had my Jolly Roger, which is a little bit bigger than this knife right here. Yeah. It's probably about that long. Noah and DA have the pictures. I don't have them, I'd send them to you, but I laid my knife down on it, and it was probably a 1/2 inch to an inch on either side of that knife of the print. So I think I want to say it measured like maybe 7.5 inches,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere around there. Maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, the biggest I've been able to find out of a gray wolf was like 4.5 inches, and
Mm-hmm.
that's big as far as gray wolf goes, or
Right.
timber wolf, whichever one of them. I can't even remember which one's bigger between the gray wolf. I think gray wolf's bigger than timber wolf, but either way, whichever one's biggest one, I think 4.5 inches, which is big. But this was
Mm-hmm.
like upwards of 7.5 inches
Oh,
long.
wow. Wow. See, I've got a giant Malamute. He's 170 pounds, and his track. So I had him out in the snow one day, right? And his track is about the size of my hand, and my hand's, about 6 inches. And so it's like, you get to looking at that and thinking about the size of what made it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and because he's, people look at me and go, do you have a pet werewolf? Yeah. It's what one of my grandkids tells me. He's like, Mom, Grandma, that's a werewolf, right? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But yeah, so it's like, that's very possible, something that big. There's some substantial size to that. So, and that's not the only encounter that you've ever had down there now, is it?
No. Well, yeah, we've had stuff here and there, like we've seen eye shine, we've movement, we've heard things, but Combs Ferry, which is about probably I think it's like 10 miles across the lake. It's still in that general area,
Mm-hmm.
but just across the lake, that's the place that we had where we found the deer hide in the tree, and found or we heard stuff being thrown at us. Saw the eye shine when we were finally pulling off. We saw about 8 or 9 different sets of eye shine, about anywhere from 9.5 to 10 feet, or varying heights off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
As we were pulling off. Yeah, that was an experience that night.
Yeah.
Found a fish head had been ripped off and stuck in a tree. Found a deer hide that had been ripped apart and stuck up in a tree. Found tracks. Found heard samurai chatter.
And
Me and Noah saw.
I'm sorry, that this place is not that easy to access, right?
No, it's a peninsula that's been bulldozed off by the Army Corps of Engineers. And we had to get in. We had to get in there by boat, and it was after midnight when we hit the ground. So, chances of there being somebody in there that was doing this stuff, pretty slim.
Yeah, highly unlikely in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's off the lake also in that area. So yeah, it's highly unlikely that there's somebody in there doing that, because, like you said, it's not a place where people are going to be camping and hanging out at night.
No, well, you're not supposed to be to camp there. You're really not supposed. They'll still let people go in there and fish during the day, but technically you're not supposed to be in there after dark anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can drive up to the old shack, the guard shack or whatever, but
Yeah.
you can't drive any further than that because the entrance has been bulldozed over. And I'm talking like, it's not like, okay, there's a few rocks in the road. I'm talking like there's a debris pile, and you'd have to have a rock crawler to drive over this debris pile that's in the middle of that road. But then you get in there and it looks like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. I mean, it's just like Joe Bald, you could go in there. DA says this all the time. You could go in there with some landscaping equipment, and in a couple of hours probably have that place ready to go. Mm-hmm. This place, there's those big, thick concrete picnic tables. It's got the big concrete tops that probably weigh over 1,000 pounds. There's one that's like been picked up off the top of the one of the sets of legs and dumped over in the middle of the road. Short of getting equipment in there, I don't know how anything gets that from point A to point B. That's a chunk of concrete. Wyatt's got a picture of me standing on it, and like I said, I'm not small, but I'm standing in the middle of it, and I could have laid down on that thing and had a foot on either side of my head or my feet
Right.
and it was probably a good 3 inches thick. So that's probably at least 1,000 pounds of concrete and
Oh
rebar
yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and it just blows my mind too. Why have those areas been closed off? I mean, they're because in that area, they're camping, fishing, all of that is very popular. So it's like, why on earth would you close two areas off that are already set up for that if there isn't a reason?
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like, do they know there's something in there and that's why they closed it all off?
I would say probably. It's like I said, Joe Ball, you could get in there and you could fix that. You
Mhm.
could fix it up and it'd be ready to go. At most, if you got a crew in there and they worked a solid week, they could probably clean that place, because there's still, as far as people go down there and fish during the day. People go hang out during the day. It's just usually at night times when they won't let you. You're not supposed to camp in there,
Right.
even though most all the sites you would just have to go in there and clean them up. There's nothing. Maybe one or two of the tables have got corners broke off of them, or I think we did see one table that was broke into, which takes something to break one of those tables in two. But those are the little smaller. You got the small like family version like that goes to the smaller campsites, but then the ones over
Right.
at Combs Ferry are like the big, like if you got like a big family reunion type one of those big long
Oh,
like
okay.
7
Yeah.
foot 7 foot tables.
Hmm.
That's why people are like, well, they're not that. Yeah, this is one of the big ones. This thing's about 7 feet long and about 3 inches thick. That's a big slab of concrete.
So would you guys
But
ever go back to Combs Ferry?
oh, we've been back several times since then.
Have you? Have you?
Oh yeah.
Have you had
Oh, yeah.
anything like what you had that first time?
The next time that we went during the day. Doc was back with us that time, and we felt like there was something watching us. And we found a little bit. Not, I mean, it was like a little piece like this of deer hide that was up in the tree. Nothing like that night. And we felt like something was kind of watching or pacing us, but nowhere near as intense as that night. So, and I think a lot of times it's like depending on what time of the year, and because I don't think they stay on that peninsula all the time, but that peninsula, it works out really good because obviously we know they eat deer, and all the deer remains we found over there. You flush a deer onto that peninsula, where's it going to go?
It's not going anywhere. Yeah.
If you're flushing it in from that side and you're driving it from that side, it's not going to turn around and run back into you. So it gets to the edge of those peninsulas and it's done. It's cooked, so to speak. So I think they stay there during those times, but then I think they move on. Because that night that we were out there with all of us and had that, it was middle of summer. But then when we was back over there with Doc, it was wintertime, and it was, like I said, it was not as, the feeling was just different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's a signal.
Yeah. Well, and I was talking to somebody the other day, I can't remember now, about what people say migration, and I think we're misconstruing or people are misconstruing what we say when we say migration. We're not talking hundreds and hundreds of miles. We're talking maybe a 50 square mile area.
I think they range in territorial range, but I think it's a lot bigger than that. Because you think a big cougar will have a 260-mile territorial range.
Yeah. And whatever their range is, I think they range through that as things ripen. They know that in this part of their range in the springtime, you've got berries, and later on there's this. And I think they're constantly moving through it all year long, because I think in the wintertime they go to more of a carnivorous diet because that's what's available.
Yeah, I think it's more reasonable to think it's probably more along the lines of 500 to 600 square miles. Because you think about it, if they do live in family groups, a group that size, the caloric intake that they're going to have, they would have to have a big, and it may even be up around, 1,000 to 1,500 miles, because the food intake that they would run a square 50 miles, 50 square miles. I'll get it out in a minute. They would run that food source pretty dry pretty quick in that. So I would think they would have to have a enormous territorial range. And I don't think they migrate. I think they have a territorial range. That's why you see, you might see, because the bigger it is, the less likely you are to see them in the same place for, extended periods of time, because they are moving in that big area.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you think about it, if you just start looking at the national parks and national forests and things like that, I've told you, that's 88 million acres. The Mark Twain itself, which is right there where you're at, that's over a million acres.
Yeah.
That's a lot of area.
That's a lot of food source right there.
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah, it is. People wonder why we haven't found them. Well, there's 1 million acres here in Missouri alone.
Well, and I didn't know this till me and Johnny were researching for the show. The New Jersey Pine Barrens. When you think of New Jersey, you think of the city, the turnpike,
right.
Atlantic City. You don't think nature and you don't think forest. The Jersey Pine Barrens are 1 million acres.
Yeah.
That blew my mind, because I'm like, the New Jersey Pine Barrens are over 1 million acres? That's mind blowing to think of. And when you start telling people these numbers, and that does not count public use ways, it doesn't count Bureau of Land Management, doesn't count reservations, doesn't count state parks. Just the national parks in the United States are 88 million acres. When you throw all those other areas in there, it gets up to over 1 billion acres. Billion with a B. There's countries that you can hide in that. There's areas in this country that human feet have not walked ever.
Absolutely.
People just don't realize that. How big this country is.
They just don't understand how big it is. And we are so disconnected from it because of our technology, that we can be sitting out in the middle of it and miss stuff. I say that all the time. So, but anyway, well, Robby, we have met, we've reached that hour. That went by pretty quickly.
Yeah.
We always find something to talk about, don't we?
Yep.
Well, I thank you for coming on and sharing your time with us tonight. We appreciate that so much. And I'm sure you'll be back on in the future, because, anytime you're out doing something, you holler at me and let me know, and we'll talk about it. All right.
Well, we're going back to the LBL in April. Me and DA and Doc. Yeah, they're the Woodwalkers are having their little meet and greet. So DA and Doc and I are going to that. So hopefully we'll have some good stories.
Absolutely. I got to go to the LBL in September, and that's definitely an interesting place for sure. Yeah.
That place has its own aura, let's say.
That's it for sure. Well, after you guys get back from that, we'll have to talk to you and see what happened. So, well, like I said, thanks for coming on, Robby, and we'll have you back on at another time. And we're going to be sure and put all your information about your books in the link so everybody can find it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Have a good evening.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, tribe. That's all for this episode of the Bigfoot, Wildman, and Booger Show. Thanks for wandering the Missouri woods with us today. We'll be back soon with more mysteries, more encounters, and maybe some surprises hiding in the shadows. Until then, keep your boots muddy, your eyes on the tree line, and remember, show me your Bigfoot.